Today's story takes us to Boston. My name is Nora Reeves. I'm 29 years old, and at 4 inches the morning, my mother was kneeling on the wet pavement outside my apartment building, mascara running down her chin, screaming my name so loud the neighbor's dog started howling 3 floors up. My father stood behind her, gripping a manila envelope, like it was the only thing keeping him vertical. And my sister, the one who had spent the last 6 years being introduced as the family's pride while I was treated like a footnote, was pressing every buzzer on the panel because I had changed my entry code. But 12 hours earlier, all 3 of them had been laughing at my grandmother's kitchen table while I discovered that the house she left me, the only thing anyone in that family had ever given me that felt like love, had been sold out from under me. And they had forged my signature to do it. Let me go back. I work as a forensic accountant. That means companies hire me when money disappears, and someone needs to figure out who moved it, where it went, and how many lies were stacked on top. I trace fraud for a living. I read ledgers the way most people read faces. And I am very, very patient, which is probably why my family never thought I'd be a problem. Growing up in Medford, Massachusetts, I was the quiet one. My older sister Vanessa was the event. She walked into rooms and rearranged the gravity. Loud, beautiful, confident in a way that made people hand her things she never earned. She got the bedroom with the bay window. She got the car at 16. She got my mother's attention like oxygen, constant and unquestioned. I got the leftovers, and I don't just mean at dinner. My father was a general contractor who talked about work ethic like it was a religion but practiced it like a hobby. He had a talent for starting projects and a gift for abandoning them. My mother managed a dental office and managed our family the same way, scheduled, efficient, and completely indifferent to pain. The only person in that house who ever looked at me like I had edges worth noticing was my grandmother, Rose. She lived in a 2-story colonial in Somerville that smelled like lavender and old books. When I was 11, she sat me at her kitchen table, handed me a shoebox full of receipts, and said, "Sort these by date, then by amount. I want to see if your uncle is stealing from the register." I did it in 40 minutes. She looked at the piles, looked at me, and said, "You see what other people hide. Don't ever let them make you feel small for it." She left me that house, in her will. Clearly, specifically, with language a first-year law student couldn't misread. The house at 34 Prospect Ave, Somerville, Massachusetts, to my granddaughter Nora Reeves, to be held, maintained, or sold at her sole discretion. She died when I was 23. I was finishing my master's degree and couldn't move in immediately, so my parents offered to keep an eye on the property while I got settled. I said yes, because I was grieving and stupid, and still believed that family meant something in that house, beyond convenience. For 6 years, I paid the taxes remotely. I covered the insurance. I sent money for minor repairs when my father claimed the gutters were failing, or the furnace needed servicing. I never once visited, because every time I mentioned coming up, someone had a reason it wasn't a good time. Vanessa's engagement party, Mom's surgery recovery, Dad's back, the bathroom renovation, always something. I should have known. 3 months ago, I got a letter from the Middlesex County Assessor's Office, addressed to current owner at my Boston apartment, not at the Somerville address. It referenced a transfer of deed recorded 14 months earlier. I read it twice, then a third time. Then I called the Registry of Deeds and asked them to pull the document. The deed had been transferred from my name to my parents' names. Then, 41 days later, sold to a developer for $470,000. My signature was on the transfer form, except it wasn't my signature. It was close. Someone had practiced, but the R in Reeves was wrong. I write my R's with a sharp upstroke because my grandmother taught me cursive, and she believed lazy penmanship was a character flaw. Whoever signed that form had rounded the R like they'd copied it from a birthday card. A normal person might have called their parents screaming. I didn't. I did what I do professionally. I opened a case file on my own family. Over the next 11 weeks, I pulled every document I could access. The recorded deed, the settlement statement, the buyer's title search, the notary log, which showed my mother's name as the witnessing notary, a conflict of interest so blatant it practically glowed. I cross-referenced the sale date with my father's bank deposits and found a wire for $412,000 that appeared 3 days after closing. I traced where the money went, $110,000 toward Vanessa's wedding at a vineyard in the Berkshires, $62,000 toward my parents' credit card debt, $80,000 into a money market account under my father's name. The rest scattered across smaller expenses. A new truck, a kitchen renovation, my mother's dental conference trip to Scottsdale. They hadn't just stolen my house. They divided it up like a holiday roast and served themselves. And here's the part that should have broken me but didn't. While I was tracing the money, I found something else. A string of emails between my mother and a title attorney, forwarded by mistake to a shared family iCloud account no one remembered I still had access to. In one message, my mother wrote, "Nora won't notice for years. She barely visits. And even if she does, what's she going to do? She's not the type." In another, my father wrote to the same attorney. Rose was confused at the end. The will was sentimental, not practical. The house belongs with the family, not with someone who can't even keep a boyfriend. That one I read 6 times. Not because it hurt. I was past hurt by then, but because I wanted to memorize the exact phrasing for later. I didn't confront them yet. I kept working. I ordered a certified copy of my grandmother's will from probate court. I documented every payment I'd made toward the house since her death, totaling $31,000 in taxes, insurance, and maintenance. I had my own handwriting analyzed by a forensic document examiner who confirmed the signature on the deed transfer was not mine. I prepared everything the way I would for a client. Clean, referenced, and devastating. Then Vanessa's wedding weekend arrived, and I drove to Massachusetts with a garment bag and a flash drive and the quietest fury I have ever carried. The rehearsal dinner was at a restaurant in Cambridge that Vanessa had chosen because it had exposed brick and a wine list that photographed well. 40 people, maybe 45, packed into a private room with low lighting and loud opinions. My parents were glowing. My mother wore a dress she couldn't have afforded 6 months ago. My father kept buying rounds like he was running for office. Vanessa floated between tables, radiant and certain, introducing her fiancé Marcus to every cousin and colleague, as if she were unveiling a painting. Nobody asked where the money came from. Or maybe they already knew and didn't care. I sat at a corner table with my cousin Derek, the only person in the family who had ever texted me on my grandmother's death anniversary. He looked at me sideways and said, "You okay? You've got that look." "What look?" "The one where you're about to rearrange somebody's entire week." I smiled. "Not yet." My mother found me during dessert. She sat down, wine loose and generous, and put her hand on mine. "I'm so glad you came, Nora. Family should be together for things like this." I looked at her hand. The ring she was wearing was new. I wondered how many square feet of my grandmother's house were sitting on her finger. "Speaking of family," I said carefully, "how's the Somerville house doing?" The briefest flicker, the tiniest hesitation. Then, smooth as dental composite. "Oh, you know your father. Always something to fix." She patted my hand and stood up. "Enjoy the tiramisu." She had lied directly to my face without blinking, and she had done it in my grandmother's name. That was when I decided the rehearsal dinner was not the right venue. The wedding reception was. The ceremony the next afternoon was at a chapel in Brookline. Vanessa cried during her vows. My mother cried during Vanessa's vows. I sat in the third row and watched the performance with professional detachment. Marcus seemed decent enough. He wasn't the target. The reception was at the Vineyard, Harlow Estate. White tents and string lights and lavender in mason jars. 180 guests. A 12-piece band. A photo booth with a neon sign that read, "Forever starts now." I did the math in my head. This party cost roughly $110,000, give or take a few thousand. I knew exactly where the budget had come from because I had the wire receipts. The first 2 hours, I waited. I danced with Derek. I made small talk with aunts. I drank water while everyone else drank wine, because I needed my mind sharp and my hands steady. At 8:40, the toast began. My father went first. He talked about Vanessa like she was a sunrise he'd personally arranged. My mother went second, crying again, calling Vanessa her greatest joy. A few relatives looked at me when she said that. I kept my face still. Then the maid of honor spoke. Then Marcus's best man. Then Marcus's mother, who said something kind and forgettable about love and patience. And then my father stood up again, raised his glass, and said, I also want to thank everyone who made this day possible. Family means showing up, and this family shows up. That was when I stood. I didn't rush. I didn't raise my voice. I walked to the microphone the way I walk into depositions, steady, prepared, and carrying documents. I'd like to say a few words too, if that's okay. My mother's smile tightened. My father looked confused. Vanessa tilted her head like she couldn't quite place why this was wrong. Most of you know I'm an accountant, I began. What you might not know is that I specialize in tracing money that people try to hide. It's what I do every day. I follow the numbers until the story they tell stops being fiction. I paused. 6 years ago, my grandmother Rose left me her house in Somerville. She put it in her will, clearly and specifically, because she wanted me to have something solid in a family that never quite made room for me. The room had already changed. Not silent yet, but shifting, the way air moves before weather. 14 months ago, that house was sold. For $470,000. I didn't sell it. I didn't authorize the sale. My signature on the transfer deed was forged. I looked at my father. The R was wrong, Dad. Grandma taught me cursive. My mother stood up so fast, her chair scraped the floor. Nora, this isn't the time. You're right, I said. The time was 14 months ago, when you had a notary stamp pressed to a document you knew was fraudulent. Now, the silence was complete. I've spent 11 weeks documenting everything. The forged deed, the notary conflict, the wire transfers. 110,000 of that money paid for this wedding. I gestured at the room, the lights, the flowers, the band now frozen mid-setup for the next set. 62,000 went to credit card debt. 80,000 went into a money market account, and the rest bought a truck, a kitchen, and a trip to Arizona. I looked at Vanessa. I'm not here to ruin your day. I'm here because every person in this room deserves to know that the toast Dad just gave about family showing up was funded by stealing from the one family member you all agreed didn't matter. Vanessa's face went through 4 expressions in 2 seconds. Confusion, recognition, fury, then something I didn't expect. Shame. My father recovered first, the way men like him always do, with volume. This is ridiculous. You have no idea what you're talking about. Your grandmother wanted the family to benefit from that house. Then why did she leave it to me? I asked. And why did you need to forge my name? My mother tried a different approach. Tears. Rose was confused at the end. She didn't mean to exclude everyone. We were trying to honor the family. You wrote in an email that I wouldn't notice for years, I said. And Dad wrote that Grandma was sentimental, not practical. Would you like me to read those out loud? Or is the summary enough? My mother sat back down, like someone had cut her strings. Marcus's father stood up from the head table and said, very quietly, is this true? Nobody answered, which was its own answer. Derek, from the back, said, I always wondered how they were paying for all this. My Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister, the one who organized every family event and controlled every narrative, pushed through the crowd and grabbed my arm. You need to stop this right now. Whatever issues you have with your parents, this is Vanessa's day. Vanessa's day was purchased with a forged deed and stolen property, I said, pulling my arm free. If you'd like to discuss the ethics of timing, we can start with why nobody told me about the sale for 14 months. Patricia's mouth opened and closed twice. Then she turned to my mother and hissed, You told me Nora agreed to the sale. My mother didn't answer. Patricia's face changed from anger to something colder. Evelyn, you told me she agreed. The cracks were spreading now, not just between me and them, but between all of them. Vanessa finally spoke. Her voice was shaking, but it wasn't rage at me. It was the sound of someone realizing the ground they'd been standing on was borrowed. Mom, did you forge Nora's signature? Silence. Mum. My mother looked at the tablecloth. It was more complicated than that. It's a yes or no question, Vanessa said. And for the first time in our lives, she sounded like me. My father stepped in, trying to reframe. We did what was best for the family. The house was sitting empty. Nora wasn't using it. Rose would have understood. Rose left it to me, I said, because she knew exactly what this family would do if she didn't. That hit the room like a window breaking. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single printed page, a certified copy of the will with the relevant paragraph highlighted. I set it on the nearest table. For anyone who wants to verify. Then I turned to Vanessa one more time. I'm sorry this happened at your wedding, but I spent 6 years paying taxes on a house I was told was still mine, while my own family was selling it to pay for a party I wasn't even sure I'd be invited to. I picked up my purse. Congratulations on the marriage. Marcus seems like a good person. I hope he stays that way. I walked out through the tent flap into October air that tasted like wood smoke and endings. The aftermath moved faster than I expected. By midnight, my phone was vibrating nonstop. Cousins, aunts, people I hadn't spoken to in years. Derek texted first. Holy hell, Nora. Then my cousin Lisa. Patricia is losing it on your mom right now. Your dad locked himself in the men's room for 20 minutes. Marcus's family left early. His mother, the kind one, sent me a private message through Vanessa's wedding website that simply said, I'm sorry you went through this. No one deserves that. At 1:15 the morning, Vanessa called. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Her voice was raw, scraped down to something I barely recognized. Did you know before tonight? I've known for 11 weeks. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me? She was quiet long enough to answer honestly. Probably not. That's why. She breathed for a while. Then, Marcus wants to know if the wedding is legally. If where the wedding is between you and Marcus. The fraud is between me and our parents. Those are 2 separate problems. But the money was stolen from me. Yes, that's something you'll need to sit with. More silence. Then she said something that surprised me. I didn't know, Nora. I swear I didn't know about the forgery. I believed her. Vanessa was many things. Spoiled, careless, blinding. But she wasn't a planner. She consumed what was put in front of her without asking where it came from, which was its own kind of cruelty, but a different category. I believe you didn't know, I said. But you never asked. You never once asked how Mom and Dad were suddenly paying for a $200,000 wedding when Dad couldn't keep a project running 6 months ago. She started crying again. I know. That's the part you own. She didn't argue. That was new. At 2:20, my father called. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail that began with bluster and ended with something that might have been fear. You have no right to humiliate this family publicly. We'll discuss this like adults. I saved the voicemail. Chain of custody is a reflex. At 3:15, my mother texted, You've always been jealous of your sister. This was about revenge, not justice. I didn't reply. Some sentences are their own evidence. Then at 4 inches the morning, the buzzer rang. Not once, not twice, but continuously, like someone was leaning against it with their full weight. I looked at the camera feed and there they were. My mother on her knees on the wet pavement, my father holding his envelope, Vanessa pressing every button on the panel. A neighbor buzzed them in because the noise was unbearable, and within 2 minutes, they were at my door. The pounding started hard and didn't stop. Nora, please. My mother's voice was wrecked. We can fix this. We'll give the money back. Whatever you want. My father, stripped of all authority, opened the door before this becomes something none of us can undo. And Vanessa, quieter than both of them. Nora, I'm not here for them. I'm here because I should have been on your side a long time ago. I stood on my side of the door and listened to their breathing for a full minute. Then I opened it with the chain on, just enough to see their faces in the hallway fluorescence. My mother looked destroyed. My father looked old. Vanessa looked like someone who had woken up inside a life she didn't recognize. Tell me what you want, my mother whispered. I want you to hear what I'm about to say and understand that this is not a negotiation. I spoke through the gap without emotion. First, You will return $470,000 to an escrow account in my name within 60 days. I don't care how. Sell the truck. Drain the money market. Borrow from Patricia. That's your problem. My father started to protest. That's not second. You will sign a corrective affidavit acknowledging the forged deed. My attorney has already drafted it. If you refuse, I file a criminal complaint for forgery, fraud, and notary misconduct. Mom, that one's specifically yours. My mother made a sound like air leaving a tire. Third, you will never again tell anyone in this family or outside of it that Grandma Rose was confused, sentimental, or didn't mean what she wrote. She was the sharpest person in this family, and you know it. You will say her name with respect, or you won't say it at all. The hallway was so quiet, I could hear the elevator humming 6 floors down. And fourth, I said, looking at each of them in turn, you will stop treating me like the family's margin of error. I am not the practice daughter you get to discard before focusing on the real one. I am the one Grandma Rose trusted with her house, because she knew, better than anyone, that I was the only person in this family who could look at a lie and take it apart. My father stared at the floor. My mother nodded, small and broken. Vanessa wiped her eyes and said, I'll make sure they do it. You'll make sure you do it too, I said, because you wore a $110,000 wedding dress made of my inheritance, and you didn't ask a single question. She flinched, then nodded. I closed the door. They stood outside for another 10 minutes. I heard my mother crying softly, my father murmuring something I couldn't make out, and Vanessa telling them both to go home. Eventually, they did. I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with my grandmother's copy of Little Women, open to the page where she'd underlined a sentence decades ago. I am not afraid of storms, for I am learning how to sail my ship, she had written in the margin, in her perfect cursive with the sharp R's. For Nora, someday. Over the next week, the story reached every branch of the family with the speed and accuracy of a fire in dry wood. Patricia stopped speaking to my mother entirely after discovering she'd been lied to about my supposed consent. 2 of my father's oldest friends called him and asked questions he couldn't answer. The developer who had purchased the house contacted his own attorney after learning about the forged deed. And suddenly, the clean sale my parents had been counting on was anything but. Vanessa and Marcus postponed their honeymoon. She told me later it was because Marcus needed time to process that his in-laws were capable of what they'd done. He didn't blame Vanessa, but something between them had shifted. A new carefulness. Like walking through a room where something had recently shattered. My parents hired an attorney. Their attorney called my attorney. My attorney sent over the corrective affidavit, the documented forgery analysis, and a timeline of financial transfers so detailed, it read like a prosecution exhibit. Their attorney called back the same day and said his clients were prepared to cooperate. Within 3 weeks, the money began moving back. Not all at once, not gracefully. My father sold the truck. My mother liquidated a retirement account. Patricia, furious but not heartless, lent them a portion with conditions that I suspect were more punishing than mine. The money market account was drained. By the 5th week, $470,000 sat in escrow under my name. I didn't celebrate. You don't celebrate recovering something that should never have been taken. My mother wrote me a letter. Physical paper, mailed with a stamp. In it, she said she was sorry that the pressure of Vanessa's wedding and my father's debts had created a panic she couldn't see past, that she had convinced herself I wouldn't miss what I wasn't using. She wrote, I told myself it wasn't really stealing because you were family. I read that sentence 3 times. It was the most honest thing she had ever said to me, and also the most damning. Because that is exactly how families like mine operate. They don't call it theft. They call it redistribution. They don't call it cruelty. They call it closeness. Vanessa came to see me one Saturday morning. No makeup, hair pulled back, carrying 2 coffees and an expression I'd never seen on her before. Humility. We sat on my fire escape and she told me things I hadn't known. That she'd overheard our parents arguing about money for years. That she'd once found a past due notice in the recycling bin and our mother had told her it was junk mail. That she had suspected the wedding budget didn't add up but convinced herself not to look too closely. Because if I looked, she said, staring into her coffee, I'd have to give something back. And I didn't want to. That was probably the most honest thing Vanessa had ever said to me too. I told her I didn't hate her. I told her I wasn't sure I trusted her yet. She said that was fair. Then she asked if she could see Grandma's house, the one she'd never bothered to visit while Rose was alive. It's not mine anymore, I said. The developers already started demo. She looked at me. And for the first time, I watched my sister feel the actual weight of what had been lost. Not the money, the house, the lavender, the kitchen table where Rose taught me to read receipts, the margin notes in old books, the things money couldn't reassemble. I'm sorry, she said, and meant it. I nodded. I know. But knowing someone is sorry and knowing they've changed are two different things, and I was done confusing the two. My father never apologized. Men built like him don't apologize. They reorganize. They reframe. They wait until enough time passes that silence can be mistaken for resolution. He signed every document. He returned every dollar. But he never once said the words. And I stopped expecting them the day I realized that some people's silence is the loudest confession they're capable of. A month later, I put the escrow funds into a trust in my grandmother's name, the Rose Reeves Trust, earmarked for property preservation grants in Somerville, small homes with histories, families that needed help keeping what belonged to them. It wouldn't bring back her colonial on Prospect Ave, but it would protect someone else's. People always want stories like this to end with a reunion. Hugs at Thanksgiving. Tearful forgiveness over pumpkin pie. I understand the appeal. It's comforting to believe that blood can absorb any amount of betrayal and still hold. But here is the honest ending. I did not go home for the holidays that year. I spent Thanksgiving with Derek and his partner at their apartment in Jamaica Plain, eating Thai food and playing cards. It was the quietest, warmest holiday I'd had in years. I talk to Vanessa once a week now. Short conversations, careful ones, like two people learning a language they should have spoken all along. She's trying. I can see that. Whether trying is enough remains to be seen. My parents exist at a distance I control. I answer when necessary. I visit when I choose. I no longer send money, fix problems, absorb insults, or pretend that the word family is a skeleton key that opens every locked door in my life. And some nights, when I'm working late, tracing numbers that someone thought they'd hidden well enough, I think about my grandmother sitting at her kitchen table, handing an 11-year-old girl a shoebox full of receipts, and saying, "You see what other people hide." She was right. I do, and I finally stopped hiding from it myself. So let me ask you honestly, if you found out the people closest to you had stolen the one thing that meant the most to you, and then used it to throw a party you were barely invited to, would you expose them? Or would you keep the peace because they're family? And how many of us are sitting right now in a family that mistakes our silence for permission? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story. And tell me, what time is it where you are? I'm curious how far this one will travel.